welcome to this episode of Conversation with a Chef. I'm Jo Ritty and I love sharing with you the conversations I get to have with talented and passionate chefs. It's the backstory, if you will, to the food they're putting up. I begin today by acknowledging the Wurundjeri people of the Kulin Nation, traditional custodians of the lands where this conversation took place, land which was never ceded, land where communities came together to eat seasonally, locally and without exhausting resources. I pay my respects to their elders past and present and to any First Nations people listening today. Today I'm talking to Kay-Lene Tan. Kay-Lene is a renowned pastry chef celebrated for her innovative desserts that combine storytelling with bold flavours. Before embarking on her culinary career, she worked as a documentary maker with a background in mass communication from Ngee Ann Polytechnic in Singapore. A turning point came during a quarter-life crisis, which led her to pivot toward her passion for food, eventually enrolling at At-Sunrice GlobalChef Academy to pursue pastry and bakery arts. Her talent took her to some of the world's best kitchens and earned her accolades, including being a semi-finalist on MasterChef Australia Dessert Masters in 2023. On the show, she impressed with desserts inspired by her heritage and personal memories, such as her Milo Dinosaur dish and a new beginning creation, symbolising seasonal change. While she didn't take home the title, Kay-Lene described her experience on Dessert Masters as transformative, and it reignited her confidence and reaffirmed her unique culinary voice. Kay-Lene is articulate and realistic and glorious in the way she describes dessert creation, but also her own journey. And she also has the best laugh. I learned so much from our conversation and came away all the better for having spoken to her. Hi Kay-Lene, how are you?
Lovely to meet you.
Yeah, you too. So how long have you been with Omnia and Yugen?
I started 24th of September,
Oh.
so pretty new, 2 months.
Yeah.
It's been good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you're just ready for a change?
Well, let's just say the opportunity came about. I wasn't really looking because, I was all this time, the last 1 year has been trying to get DECA up and running with Adam, but obviously that has taken a bit of a back seat at the moment because I'm not quite sure when it would be done, and this opportunity came about, and yeah, it's been, I never say no. It's the thing, but yeah.
So executive pastry chef, that means that you're overseeing how many venues?
So at the moment it's Yugen and Omnia and our function space Bromley, and hopefully in the next 6 months Yugen T-Bar will be up and running again. So
okay.
That will be 3, at the moment 2, soon to be 3 venues and 1 function space. Yeah.
And is that the most you've done? Is that the biggest scale?
I think Ritz-Carlton was probably the biggest scale, but obviously it's very different because Ritz-Carlton is a well-known hotel brand.
Yeah.
Owned by a bigger group, the Marriott group. So I think it's a very different dynamic. Whereas here, it's a little bit like what Tonka and Coda was like when I was running across 2 venues. So I guess that would be the biggest difference.
Do you have more, carte blanche to do what you would like to do in this kind of scenario?
I think in this kind of scenario, it's always, especially coming into 2 venues that have already so well established, it's about working together with the chefs to still be able to express the kind of chef that I am, but also working with the style that they have already created, and they've already created menus that are favored by many people, the customers and all that kind of stuff. So trying to find that happy middle of their style and my style, and I think the whole team has been really welcoming and open, and it's been actually a really, really great experience so far.
So where do you start then? Are you looking at, I guess you start with flavours, but are you thinking of, how it looks as well? Where do you start when you're creating a menu and working in with those other people?
I think it's starting with what kind of cuisine the restaurant offers is probably top of the list, and working with 2 very different venues. Omnia is modern Australian European type bistro, and Yugen is very much Southeast Asian, which is something I'm slightly more familiar with. I guess I could say it's very similar to what Tonka and Coda was like as well. Tonka is modern Indian and you've got Koda that was Southeast Asian. So here it's kind of a play on that as well, two very different styles of desserts. But it's been fun because I've never actually been able to work in like somewhat of like a European type bistro setting. So, getting to do more classic French techniques and desserts has been definitely a breath of fresh air. And also it's a challenge for me as well. So, for me, I like creating desserts that tell a story about my background as well, and desserts that people enjoy, that invoke nostalgia, that at the end of the day, when you eat it, it brings you somewhere. You eat something and you go, oh my gosh, this reminds me of this thing. And that for me is the greatest joy when creating desserts. And I think most importantly, it's creating desserts that I myself would like to eat as well if I were to go and dine in a restaurant. Aesthetics and stuff like that is definitely important because you eat with your eyes first, but at the same time I think the flavor has to match the aesthetic. And I think especially with Omnia, it's creating more simple desserts, but the thing about simple desserts is that it has to be perfect. You can't hide behind any sort of like frou-frou or any sort of confetti that's flying out everywhere. It has to be perfect. So I think that definitely is also a challenge for myself.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was reminded the other day when I was speaking to a chef actually at Maison Bâtard that with desserts, when you have really excellent food or a series of dishes in the main courses, an entree and mains, the dessert's the end of the meal, so you still want to have your flavour and flair and all of that, but you've got to be aware of people's hunger or and balancing that out with not being too rich and not too sugary and all of those kinds of things. It's a real challenge. I hadn't really thought about that because I always think desserts, when really excellent pastry chefs are making desserts, they're so beautiful and so full of lots of elements, but as you say, getting that balance and the simpler, the more challenging in a way.
I think for me, dessert is the lasting impression at the end of the meal. Sometimes you could have a pretty mediocre meal, but you have a really amazing dessert, and that stays with you for a long time because obviously it's the last bite that you have before you walk out of the restaurant. And that's why I always think that dessert is really important. It's always the last 10 minutes of anything that's really important, whether or not it's a dining experience or like a soccer game or anything like that. The last 10 minutes will tell you whether or not it's gonna be a winner.
Yes.
And I think that for me is really, really important. And also, like I said, seeing what the menu is about, balancing that out, offering something that's familiar, but at the same time, be able to bring some sort of joy to your customer, I think is also really important. Chocolate desserts go really well, but also at the same time, not everybody loves chocolate. So, you always have to make sure that when you're creating a menu, it has to speak to a large variety of, flavor palettes.
Yeah. And what are some examples on the different menus that here? What are some...
So recently we've got some beautiful Ruffy's pineapples in, and they're amazing, super, super sweet. So I created a dessert that, balances a bit of salty and sweet, which is a roasted Ruffy's pineapple cake. It's on a brown butter cake with a Vegemite ice cream. So you've got a little bit of that savory in there to kind of balance out the sweetness of the pineapple. And the pineapple is so beautiful on its own that it doesn't really need much doing to it. It's just roasted in the oven, baked on top of a cake, and it's absolutely delicious. And the thing about that dessert is that we use the entirety of the Ruffy's pineapple. So whatever is left over, the cut-offs we make into a sauce that goes on a plate with a bit of rum, so that's also a bit of alcoholic balance there as well. The other dessert that I've put on recently in Omnia is just a simple Valrhona chocolate tart. Who doesn't love a warm chocolate tart with like creme fraiche ice cream? It's refreshing, and it's something that people are familiar with. And I think warm desserts always sit really well at the end of a meal, especially in Melbourne when it's cold like 360 days a year. And then currently right now I'm working on the menu for Yugen, which is gonna be a little bit more reflective of the desserts that I've grown up to know and love. And I'm really excited about that because having like Singaporean background, obviously Yugen flavors are something that hit a little bit closer to home, and our areas, and it's an area that I'm definitely more comfortable in creating.
So what are those flavors that you're drawn to from your childhood?
Well, I guess the best representation would be, so between with our function space, we actually do offer desserts as well. And we offer a menu that's a little bit more reflective of Omnia and a menu that's a bit more reflective on Yugen. And both menus that we offer for our events both have a dessert station. So recently I was asked to create a dessert station for the Yugen menu, so more Southeast Asian. So I think all the desserts on that dessert buffet are very reflective of me. We have a kaya, which is a coconut jam choux puff. We have mango tarts with like beautiful fresh mango, a roasted banana cake with salted caramel buttercream. We've got black sesame macarons, and a mandarin ginger chocolate bonbon, and those kind of very, I guess, Singaporean flavors are what really speak to me. I love like pandan and coconut and calamansi and could go on.
Yeah. So I was interested to see, when you decided to make the switch from documentary making to chefing, that you learned under Joël Robuchon. How did you decide that it was pastry rather than savoury?
I think I've always been drawn... I think when I first started, I didn't know the answer to this question, but I think I've always been drawn to the discipline that, it takes to be a pastry chef. That attention to detail, that precision, it really, really speaks to me. I think once one of my chefs in school told me that savory food, it's like music, because you can always kind of like change it here and there. Just, you kind of go with the flow, a bit like jazz, you just add, when it doesn't feel right, you add a beat. Whereas pastry is more like chemistry. You kind of need to follow the recipe, otherwise it could be an absolute disaster. And I think that precision and attention to detail speaks to me a lot. And I actually, I really love the fact that if you follow a recipe to the T, you will always pretty much get the same result. Yeah, and I guess the technical difficulty of it is very challenging, and I always like doing things that are challenging to me. I don't I seem to not like to take the easy way to do anything for some reason, but I guess that's what makes life interesting.
And I was listening to, watching too, that another podcast you were on, and you talked about the thrill of service and getting, and working through and problem solving, I guess, and working through challenges, and that really fascinated me because of course you would have had to do that in MasterChef as well.
Yeah.
Is that are you constantly looking for the thrill?
I think it's the adrenaline rush is always something that's part and parcel of working as a restaurant chef, which is something I'm really drawn to. But I don't know if I would say I chase the rush. There are some days that it's nice to kind of have a stable kind of running day. But obviously, when you have that adrenaline rush, when you're going through service, time goes by a lot quicker. Days seem to go by a lot faster. And I never thought I would say that I'm the sort of person that can very quickly think on my feet, especially in high pressure situations. But I feel that having the opportunity to run the pass in Tonga and be the head chef and take care of 15 chefs in the kitchen has definitely helped me hone the whole thinking on my feet aspect, especially when you have all these young chefs who are looking to you for direction in the most pressurizing situations. I think you have to be able to be confident in making those decisions, not just for yourself but your entire team as well.
Did that come easily to you, that aspect of leadership that you have to have as a head chef and executive chef?
No. Definitely not. I think at the end of the day, I'm still a little, sometimes when I look back on my journey and I reminisce about how I've gotten to where I am, a part of me is still in disbelief that I am able to be in the position that I am. I feel very fortunate and very blessed to have met a lot of great chefs along my journey that have been real champions to push me to where I am today in my career. And that's one thing that I always believe in is, in order to know where you're going, you have to remember where you came from. And, I owe a lot to the chefs that I've worked with who have basically, carved me into the type of mentor that I am today. And I've met some crazy chefs, trust me. I've had Paco tins thrown at me, I've had espuma bottles thrown at me, I've been cursed at, but what you take away from that is what not to be, like what kind of chef you don't want to be. And I think even in the worst situations, you always learn something out of it, whether it's something that you would like to do better in the future or something you would absolutely not want to do in the future. And I think those are important lessons. And I guess it's a matter of, you know, whether you see the glass half empty or half full.
And I read in a broadsheet article, I think from 2018, that you were lamenting the lack of profile for women chefs. Do you think things have improved?
I definitely think things have changed. Especially the last 10 years in Melbourne, you can definitely see the evolution of, you know, how a lot of female chefs are brought into the limelight now, you know, and I think that that's a really great thing. But I also don't think it's purposefully done that women are left out. I think that for the longest time, there's just been a very big lack of female chefs in leadership positions. But, you know, obviously in the last 10 years, a lot of that has changed. Like, you see a lot of really amazing female chefs around Australia, and I think that's really great.
Yeah. And can you still be surprised by flavour when you eat something that someone else has made, or you discover
I'm always
product?
Surprised. I love being surprised. I think the one thing that surprised me the most was when I went back to Singapore in March. I had the pleasure of dining at Triple C in Dempsey. It's Will Goldfarb's restaurant, and he served my friends and I a dessert, which was, I think it was a vanilla mousse with caviar. And it's obviously a combination I've never had in my life. But I guess now thinking about it, the sweet and the savoury aspect of both components really played well on each other, and it was incredibly delicious. And yeah, like I said, it's just one of those flavors that I was like, oh, why didn't I think of that? You know, but yeah, it's always amazing and inspirational to be able to eat food and try flavors that still surprise me today. You know, it's humbling as well, because like the food industry is constantly evolving, constantly changing. There's always things to learn. So I think that's a great thing about being in food. I love it.
Perfect. Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of Conversation with a Chef with Kay-Lene Tan at Omnia Bistro and Yugen Dining. You can check out all the goodness on Instagram at Kay-Lene Tan, that's KayLenetan, or in person at either of those restaurants. They're in South Yarra. They're both like amazing restaurants and so beautiful, and incredible experience to eat at. If you'd like to hear more stories from other chefs, I'm on Instagram at Conversation with a Chef. You can read the chat and become a subscriber, which apparently is a good thing. Like, I don't know much about these things, to be honest, but if you go to www.conversationwiththechef.com and become a subscriber, then I think you're alerted to when I produce a new episode, which is great. And also then you sort of feel part of a club. I'm not sure what my club is, but I think it'll be great. And you can also follow me on Apple and Spotify podcasts. I would love it if you told a friend about my chats, perhaps not about these outros because they're pretty terrible, aren't they? Very ad-lib. Because word of mouth is still the best way to get the stories out there. Once again, thanks so much for listening. Thanks for your patience. Have a great day and bon appetit.